July 2022. A woman boards a flight from New York to Fort Lauderdale. She has no luggage, no return ticket. She has one item in her bag that she didn't declare. She's been awake for most of the night. She knows exactly where she's going. She knows exactly who will be there. Her name is Sakiyna Thompson, and the woman she's flying to see doesn't know she exists. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She lived in a Florida apartment, worked, had friends, had a life. By every account, she was not a complicated person. She was simply someone living her 20s. She had recently started seeing someone. Nothing serious, by most descriptions. A guy she'd met, a connection, early days. She had no way of knowing that. In New York, someone was watching. Sakiyna Thompson was 28. She had also dated this same man. By July 2022, that relationship was over. What wasn't over, according to prosecutors, was Thompson's fixation on what came after it. She found Kayla on Instagram. She studied her profile. She learned her address. At some point, Kayla blocked her. A small digital action. A door closing. For Thompson, investigators would later argue that block was not an ending. It was a trigger. Here's what a block actually does on Instagram. It removes someone from your world. They can no longer see your posts. They can no longer send you messages. To them, your profile ceases to exist. It is, functionally, a digital declaration: I don't want you here. For most people, receiving a block is a mild social sting. Awkward, maybe embarrassing. You move on. For Sakiyna Thompson, prosecutors argued, it became something else entirely. A wound, a humiliation, something that required a response. The response she chose required a plane ticket. Thompson's defense, stated plainly, was impulse. This wasn't planned, they would argue. This was a person in emotional crisis acting irrationally in a moment of pain. Let's look at what that impulse required. She booked a flight. She researched the address. She traveled to an airport. She boarded a plane. She landed in a different state. She found transportation. She located the apartment building. She entered. She knocked on a door. At each one of those steps, she could have stopped. She did not stop. Investigators would reconstruct Thompson's movements in detail. The flight booking, the timestamps, the route from the airport to Kayla's address. Nothing in that reconstruction suggested confusion or panic or someone who didn't know what they were doing. It suggested a woman who had made a decision and was executing it. The word prosecutors kept returning to was premeditated, a word that matters enormously in a courtroom, a word that separates a moment of madness from a plan. That fact alone, that she traveled to Florida with a weapon, was among the most damaging pieces of evidence against the impulse defense. You don't pack a knife impulsively. You pack a knife because you intend to use one. On the night of July 2022, Sakiyna Thompson arrived at Kayla Hodgson's apartment. Kayla was home. What happened inside that apartment lasted only minutes. When Thompson left, Kayla Hodgson was dying from stab wounds. She was 23 years old. Thompson did not call for help. She left. Kayla died. Florida investigators didn't have to look far. The travel record was a near-complete trail. A New York woman had flown in, gone to this address, and left. There was no elaborate cover-up. No attempt at misdirection that held for long. Within days, Sakiyna Thompson was identified as the suspect. She was arrested. The charge was first-degree murder, the most serious classification in Florida's penal code. Not second-degree, not manslaughter, first-degree. To convict on first-degree, prosecutors must prove the killing was both willful and premeditated, that the defendant thought about it before doing it. Given the evidence, the flight, the weapon, the address research, prosecutors believed they could make that case. They were right. Between the arrest and the verdict, 3 years. This is not unusual in the American criminal justice system, particularly for murder cases. Pretrial motions, discovery, legal filings, continuances. A global pandemic had already backed up court dockets across the country, but 3 years is still 3 years. For Kayla Hodgson's family, that was 3 years of waiting for an outcome that should have been, on the evidence, inevitable. The case finally came to trial in 2025. Kayla's family had to live inside that timeline. Every continuance, every delayed hearing, every procedural postponement that kept the case from resolution. In interviews, her loved ones described the particular exhaustion of that wait. Not grief alone, but grief held in suspension. Unable to fully close because the legal process hadn't closed. They waited. They attended hearings. They showed up. For 3 years, they showed up. Sakiyna Thompson did something most murder defendants don't do. She took the stand. In the American legal system, defendants have an absolute right not to testify. The jury cannot hold it against them. Most defense attorneys counsel against it. The prosecution gets to cross-examine, and juries can be unpredictable. Thompson testified anyway. What she said, and how she said it, would become the most discussed element of the entire trial. In her testimony, Sakiyna Thompson used the word unalived. This is internet language, social media language, a euphemism that originated on platforms like TikTok as a way to discuss death or suicide without triggering content moderation filters. In a courtroom, describing what she had done to Kayla Hodgson, the word landed with extraordinary strangeness. Some viewers read it as detachment, an inability or unwillingness to fully confront the weight of the word killed. Others read it as dissociation, a mind protecting itself from what it had done. What it did, unambiguously, was spread. Clips of Thompson saying it circulated across social media. People argued about what it meant, what it revealed. The prosecution had their own theory about what it revealed. Beyond the word itself, viewers and court observers noted Thompson's composure. She was calm, measured. She spoke about flying to Florida, about going to the apartment, about what happened, with a steadiness that many watching found deeply unsettling. This is not, legally, evidence of anything. People respond to trauma and stress in countless ways. Composure does not indicate guilt. Emotion does not indicate innocence. But in the court of public opinion, which runs parallel to every high-profile trial, her demeanor became its own verdict. The prosecution's case was, in the end, the travel record. Flight booking, ticket, boarding, landing, transportation, the address, the weapon she brought with her. They walked the jury through each step of the journey, not as a story, but as a sequence of deliberate choices. Each choice a decision point where Sakiyna Thompson chose to continue. They didn't need to speculate about motive, Instagram, a block, jealousy, obsession. They just needed the jury to understand what premeditation looks like. This is what it looks like. The jury found Sakiyna Thompson guilty of first-degree murder. It was October 2025, 3 years after Kayla Hodgson died on the floor of her Florida apartment. The verdict was not surprising. The evidence had always pointed here. But verdicts are still verdicts. They are still moments. For the Hodgson family, it was the moment they had been waiting for through every delay, every continuance, every year that passed. Sakiyna Thompson was sentenced to life in prison. In Florida, a life sentence for first-degree murder without parole means exactly that. No possibility of release. No parole board. The rest of her life, inside. She was 28 when she boarded that flight. She is in her early 30s now. She will grow old in a Florida correctional facility. All because a woman she barely knew pressed a button on a phone. Here is the question this case forces us to sit with. How does a block, a digital interaction so minor that most of us perform it without a second thought, become the catalyst for a premeditated killing? Psychologists who study obsessive behavior will tell you that the perceived wound matters more than the actual wound. That rejection, even digital, even from a stranger, can, in a certain psychology, become something unbearable, an attack, an insult that demands response. Sakiyna Thompson did not fly 1,200 miles because she was blocked on Instagram. She flew 1,200 miles because of what that block meant to her. And that meaning, that architecture of obsession, is what the justice system could not explain. It could only respond to its consequences. Kayla Hodgson was 23 years old. She did not know Sakiyna Thompson. She had not wronged her. She had not chosen to be in the middle of someone else's fixation. She had lived her life, met someone, and, at some point, a stranger decided that her existence was the problem. She was killed in her own home. Her family waited 3 years for justice. They got it, eventually. They carry everything else. Kayla Hodgson deserved to be 24, then 30, then 50. She deserved all of it. She got none of it.